Hi there, Andy again, complete with my lockdown haircut. But today I thought I'd go back to a theme we were looking at before lockdown started, and that was all around the area of trials and temptations. When we look at this in the Bible, we see that trials and temptations are kind of both aspects of the idea of testing. So we have testing in the sense of proving the worth or improving the worth of something. An example might be the refinement of a precious metal. And we also have testing in the sense of probing for and exploiting a weakness, like an enemy probing a city's walls. And when we experience these times of testing, which can take all sorts of different forms. It can be an outright temptation, it can be a time of hardship, of doubt. God wants to see us come through those times stronger. He wants us to be victorious and come out the other side in a closer relationship with Him. But the enemy wants to bring us down, he wants to see us fail. In the same context, we also looked at the spiritual armour, as Paul describes it in Ephesians chapter 6, and the importance of prayer and of putting on the full armour of God so that we can take our stand against the devil's schemes. While we were going through all that, we pointed out that in terms of enemy activity, he can sometimes, in fact quite often, be quite subtle in terms of his approach. So it's not always an out and out frontal assault, if you like, in terms of an obvious temptation. It can be a creeping dripping of water onto stone that gradually leads us into a place of compromise. Now, I don't mean compromise in the sense of reaching an agreement with another party. I mean compromise in the sense of a breach of integrity, a breach of security, if you like. And today what I'd like to do is look at a case study of this that involves the king, David, and somebody else whom he had a sort of close working relationship with, if you like, a guy called Joab. So these stories that we're going to look at are told throughout the second book of Samuel, and they go on into 1 Kings. Now clearly I'm not going to be able to read it all, we're just going to dip into verses, but I do encourage you to sit down maybe with your Bible and just read the whole lot as a kind of story, as a kind of history of what happened. So I'm going to start with a reading from 2 Samuel and chapter 3. I'm reading from the NIV. Chapter 3, and I'm going to start at verse 17. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, "For some time you wanted to make David your king. Now do it. For the Lord promised David, by my servant David, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies." Abner also spoke to the Benjamites in person. Then he went to Hebron to tell David everything that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin wanted to do. When Abner, who had 20 men with him, came to David at Hebron, David prepared a feast for him and his men. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a compact with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then, David's men and Joab returned from a raid, and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, because David had sent him away, and he'd gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner son of Ner had come to the king, and that the king had sent him away, and that he had gone in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he's gone. You know Abner son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements. and find out everything you're doing. Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know about it. Now when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took Abner aside in the gateway, as though to speak with him privately. And there, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and he died. Later, when David heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner son of Ner. May his blood fall upon the head of Joab, and upon all his father's house. May Joab's house never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food. Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle of Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner. King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept also. The king sang this lament for Abner. Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one falls before wicked men. And all the people wept over him again. Then they all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets. All the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day, all the people and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, Do you not realize that a prince and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak. And these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds. Before we go on to look at the relationship between David and Joab, we need to understand a bit of the background here. So the setting of our passage is it's a time of civil war. The people of Israel are divided into two factions. There's a northern faction, which is loyal to the family of the old king, Saul, who is now dead. The commander of their armies is the guy we read about, Abner, son of Ner. He was commander of the army under Saul. Ishbosheth, who we will come across, is a son of Saul, and he's the king of the northern faction. And he was effectively placed on the throne by Abner. So you get the impression he's kind of a puppet leader, and really the main power resides with Abner. In the southern kingdom, the southern faction, Judah, they're loyal to the new king, David, God's chosen and anointed king. David is the same young man who faced down the Philistine champion Goliath. Now these sons of Zeruiah were Joab, Abishai and Asahel, and they were the sons of David's half-sister Zeruiah. So in terms of family connections, these men are David's nephews. So if we go back a chapter before the one we read in 2 Samuel, that we see a confrontation between the armies of the north and the armies of the south at a place called Gibeon. And this confrontation descends into a full-on battle. And during the battle, Asahel, Joab's brother, pursues relentlessly Abner. During that pursuit, Abner is trying to persuade him to break off. He's saying, look, I don't want to kill you, But Abner, it continues to be chased by Asahel until, in self-defense, Abner turns and kills Asahel. So there is this sort of grudge then between Joab and his remaining brother Abishai and Abner, commander of the army in the north. As time goes on, Abner, I think, comes to realise that they're on the losing side. So the armies of the south, Judah, under David, grow stronger and stronger, and the armies and the position of the northern faction grows weaker and weaker. And it seems that Abner perceives this, and he starts to prepare the ground for reconciliation in the north. And in doing so, he has a bit of a falling out with Ishbosheth, the king. So at the time we started our reading, Abner has gone to David in the south with a peace proposal. He's effectively offering to unite the northern and southern factions under David as king. So the important thing, and we see it emphasised several times in the passage we read, is that he came to David on that mission and David sent him away in peace. So there was nothing sinister about what Abner was doing. In fact, he probably thought he was acting on for the good of the country. And it's after he's been there on this peace mission that Joab comes back. He realises Abner's been there, and he lures him back without David's knowledge or consent and murders him for revenge for the death of his brother Asahel. The response then from David is to make a big show of mourning, to display that he's had nothing to do with this. But really, as king, he had responsibility for enforcing justice. And Joab goes unpunished. Okay, David's made this big show of mourning, but he has not done what the law requires. I just want to pause for a second to consider the characters of these two men. Now, they're very much painted in a warts and all kind of way throughout the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel. And David is an amazing king. He's an amazing, awesome man of God, but he's not perfect. He makes his mistakes. And Joab, similarly, although he has this dark, violent side to his nature, it is not all bad. You know, he's clearly very patriotic. He's clearly very dedicated, brave and courageous as a warrior. And in fact, there is obviously some kind of understanding and relationship with the Lord there. We read actually in the later parallel books of Chronicles of how later on, when David makes a mistake, he numbers the fighting men, an action which incurs God's anger. At that point, as David's about to do this, Joab actually tries to talk him out of it because he realises it's the wrong thing to do. So we see this kind of picture of David as good but not all good, and Joab as potentially quite violent and quite wrong in his actions, but not all bad. And we read that verse at the end of our passage where David says, "Today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me." And what on earth did he mean? I mean, this is, after all, David, who was no mean warrior himself, clearly a brave man. This is the guy who, when he was young, remember, killed the giant Goliath. So what on earth did he mean by them being too strong? Well, did he fear their power as soldiers, as leaders in the military. The fact that if he kind of stood up to him, maybe he'd lose the support of part of the army. Did he feel a family loyalty to them as his nephews? And we know from other examples that we see in Samuel that he's not always great, David, at managing and dealing with issues in his family relationships. Did he feel indebted to them for their support? I get this feeling, or one of the things it brings to my mind at least, is that David might feel a sense of dependence. So I need these men. I need their support. I need their action and ability on the part of the country. So maybe he feels that because of that reliance, because of that dependence, he has to soften his attitude and way that he deals with them in a way that means he's compromising, in a way that means he's not doing the right thing. And in a sense, when we look at the big picture, and we will go on to look at later episodes, I think this is a critical point in the relationship where Joab has done something which is completely out of order and David fails to deal with it. And I wonder if there's a parallel there for us where there might be a relationship maybe with an employer, a boss, a co-worker, a friend, a neighbour, a family member, where we feel that sense of, oh, I can't do the right thing in relation to that person because they're too strong for me, because I need them, because I rely on them, because I'm afraid of what might happen. And of course, in a sense, that's wrong and that's incorrect, because of course, just because we're too weak, as it were, to deal with it doesn't mean that God is. And this is an area that we're going to come back and look at as we go on to the later parts of this story, but we're going to leave it there for now.